I'm gonna try this again. There we go.
There it is.
I had to shut the first one off. My face was frozen on the screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it wasn't allowing me to join that one either.
No worries. Move this a little bit. There we go. Sweet. I did put a question box up a little bit ago, so I don't know. A good handful of questions, I think. So.
Yeah, I put one up, but a lot of them were like just personal
Okay.
questions and stuff like that. Like, oh, when are you prepping? Like,
Yeah. That's funny. Okay.
let me see if any other ones popped up.
So we're getting some people coming in. So Will and I are going to do. We had a open Q&A tonight, so we put some question box up in our Instagram. So we had some DM questions to go over. I have several. So we can start there and then see what you come up with.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right, let me go to the beginning here. Okay, first question we have tonight. How to properly place fat macros through a day's feeding. So I'm guessing that's like a macro timing question. So I don't know about you, but I know for me, like I have as like from a macro timing standpoint, I don't do anything as crazy as I used to. Like I'm not saying like every person's just an even spread of macros all the time, but I don't really push nutrient timing quite as hard as I used to. And assuming that they're not consuming like an exorbitant amount of fats, I do tend to kind of spread them through the meals. So unless they're consuming like 100 grams of fat a day or something really high, I'm not too overly concerned about having, 10 grams of fat or something in a meal that is higher in carbohydrate. I don't really get too worried about that.
Honestly, I'm on the same page as you. I don't really, like you said, worry as crazy about the nutrition partitioning as much as before, unless it's like in a prep and you only have so much of something. Like let's say, in this case it's fat, but let's say it's carbohydrate. It's just pre-post workout, you know what I mean, as much as possible.
Yep.
If it's fat and we're leaning towards the lower end of fat, I'm probably gonna add a little bit more in the morning, a little bit at night, and then pre-workout as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You can sometimes timing things in there for performance, like to drive performance and stuff around training for sure. But outside of that scenario where like calories are getting lower and we're getting a little scarce on macros, like kind of spread stuff out.
Yeah,
yep.
100%.
Okay. Time frame for a solid growth phase, including post-show rebound and possible cleanup. So it sounds like it's actually a client of mine. He's prepping for the universe. So like we're talking post-show rebound, growth phase, like the whole thing. Here's the thing. Like, there's a lot of context to this, but the biggest thing is like not screwing up your post-show period, because that's really going to dictate the length of that phase. Like people don't really, like you can grow. You should be very insulin sensitive. Like you can grow, and you're lean. You can grow for a very long period of time post-show. I know for me, I pushed my post-show before I even started went into like a cleanup phase was like 7 or 8 months straight. And the only reason I even pulled back was not because I was fat, it's because like digestion just needed a break. Yeah. It was more from a digestive aspect. And if you can avoid that, if you're someone that doesn't have to push exorbitant amounts of food and you start really lean, you could go longer. I've had people push 8 months, 12, even close to a year in some cases without really having to, go into that cleanup phase.
100%.
But that post-show, that's where it's at.
Yeah, I'll give an example too, because like you said, post-show is where it's at. I had a pro compete this past weekend. She did pretty well. There was like 9 Olympians in the show, or former Olympians, and she took 8th. You know what I mean? As a pro
Yeah, yeah,
debut. But we started her reverse. You know what I mean? Like her post show, she did 2 shows. She took the overall at both. She's pretty lean, and I was like, let's just increase the food. You know, minimize any cheats. And by the time she got to this show, like zero cardio. You know what I mean? So it's essentially like a reverse in itself. I'm just like, you're pretty much like good at this point, you know, and she can handle a lot of food. She's lean. And if we wanted to put her in an extended growth phase, she could probably handle like a year. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
that just shows how important it is in that post show. Because you have other people, they botch the post show, and now, you know, they're pretty fat on minimal amount of calories. And that's where, you know, that extended period of time, it's not going to be very long.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it makes all the difference for sure.
I think
Okay.
as long as body fat is at a good spot, the digestion's okay though. It's like, you know, keep pushing.
Yeah,
I have a guy who can go like a year and a half, honestly, and then we
yeah,
pull down just because digestion. Mhm.
yeah. I mean, really, the main things that stop a growth phase are digestion, body fat accumulation, or insulin
Yep.
resistance. You
Hmm.
know, those are those are be the things. So, assuming you can mitigate those three things, you can go a fairly long period of time for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, okay, I'll let you hit this one first. So, next one is diet breaks versus refeeds. What's your typical preference on a flexible timeline for prep? So I'm assuming they're like kind of open-ended time
Oh, for
frame.
sure. If it's flexible, I'm probably going to add in some diet breaks there.
Yeah.
And it might be a 1 week diet break, it might be a 2 week, but if it's flexible, like let's say someone is doing like a 30-week prep, I wouldn't be opposed to, you know, going 6 to 8 weeks, doing a 2 week, you know, diet break, going another 6 to 8 weeks, doing a 2 week diet break, and just, you know, seeing where that takes us. If it's not flexible, and it's not a time limit, it's probably going to be more refeed based. And again, like I think we talked about this last time we hopped on live. Like that doesn't mean like cheat meals, burgers and fries and stuff like that, because that's normally, you know, you're just getting kind of a dopamine response with that. But it's actually like refeeds, increasing, you know, carbohydrates for 1 to 3 days. That's typically the route I'm going to go. But I'm actually a big fan of diet breaks. I find it obviously brings down stress and allows you to be able to push harder after.
Yeah. Yeah. We know, I mean, the research, like what research we do have kind of shows us that we longer periods of time tend to have more increase in leptin
Hmm.
and little better returns, like in terms of like thyroid hormone conversion and stuff like that. So if you have the luxury of doing it, I would absolutely lean towards the longer period of time. And I would also add to that and say, if I have the time, I would rather someone like do a more subtle diet break than a larger refeed in a shorter
100%.
period of time. You know, I'd rather bump someone just like close to maintenance or just above rather than like jamming in this super high refeed for a condensed period of time.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So, okay, next one they asked about peptide question, actually, it looks like. Sermorelin, thoughts on sermorelin peptide, which is, for those of you who don't know, is basically like it's a GHRP, so it's like ipamorelin. They're similar. All of those GHRPs are kind of similar. They stimulate. I know that sermorelin and ipamorelin do stimulate a little bit different part of the brain, I believe, but like the reason that you would use them would be to get a larger pulse of endogenous growth hormones. So I know, if I'm not mistaken, most clinics seem to prescribe sermorelin
They do.
over ipamorelin or over like GHRP2 or like some people used to use, and some people still do, like the GHRP6, which increases ghrelin and hunger a lot, right? It makes you really hungry.
Hmm.
So, I mean, general thoughts on it, like they're fine. The secretagogues like that are fine. I mean, they're helpful. Timing is sometimes difficult because you really have to be in a time frame where it's like you're gonna you're fasted and you're going to get that growth hormone pulse. So there's probably not really much downside to doing it, though I don't know that I would expect anything like super profound from it.
Yeah,
Would be
I think
kind
a
of
lot
my
of people
general
think they're
takeaway.
gonna. I think a lot of people they think they're gonna see like something like taking exogenous growth hormone, but to me the best way like I describe it is it's like let's say you're low on test and you take like a test booster. You know what I mean? It's only gonna bring you so far.
Yeah, I've had a couple older clients that have like go through clinics and stuff, and they've been
Hmm.
prescribed it, and they do notice like some decent effects from it. Younger people probably kind of irrelevant for
Yep,
those folks.
agreed.
Uh, Okay.
We also got a question in the chat.
Yeah, go
Is
ahead. We
where'd
can
it
do that
go?
one.
She said, I gotta scroll it now. Said inflammation in the face normal before stepping on stage? That's going to be a no from me.
Yeah.
If that's going on, there's probably some underlying. What's probably happening is that stress response is a little bit too high. There may be something going on with the gut, but that's definitely not a normal thing. I generally want to see less inflammation as going into stage and controlling as much as possible. In that case, someone might be pushing too hard. Again, something might be going on with the gut, something along the lines of that.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you think about what a peak week process, what that process really entails, like filling out is part of it, but a lot of what peak week really is stress reduction and
Mm-hmm.
inflammation reduction. That's why we're reducing activity and reducing training and relaxing and doing all those things. So that's just as important in that final stage than actually like giving someone food, you know. So yeah, shouldn't probably be seeing that post show after
After
some
they get some food.
pizza maybe
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying that that would be plausible. Okay, let's see. We got another. Oh, we got a semaglutide question. It affects gastric emptying, correct?
Yep.
So could this in turn affect muscle protein synthesis response of meals? That's an interesting question. So semaglutide will slow gastric emptying, but I don't think it's not like directly going to speed up or slow down the process of muscle protein synthesis or degradation of it. It would just be, it's just going to slow down the digestion of the food in general. So it would maybe slow down like how quickly you reached peak amino acid levels in your blood, because like digestion is going to be slow, but I think that's probably kind of a negligible it's probably kind of a negligible point but one of the issues there I would kind of expand on that would be with semaglutide, if the dose is high enough, you're going to have a lot of people have digestive issues in general. So ideally, that's why people would titrate dose over time, and that's why, for me personally, if someone's going to be using it, I really would, in the very select cases where it would maybe be applicable, I'd really rather see them take a dose that they could still digest food and they're not like
Mm-hmm.
throwing up, you know. But no, I don't think that would be a problem. I mean, because also like all protein sources have different speeds of gastric emptying or digestion. Whey isolate versus steak is going to raise your amino acid levels at a different rate. You know, so I don't see why that would be a problem. Okay, here's a little more general question, but a good one. How do you measure physical progress? This is more of like a Gen Pop question. So, like, what parameters would you look at to measure progress in someone? And I think this is a good question because it's basic, but I think it's good because for a lot of Gen Pop people, I think they have issues with
Yep.
like knowing what to look at other than just like the scale. And I think there's like context to that would be like, well, what if someone's just getting into weight training, or
And
something
that
like
and that
that,
way it's going up
or not changing or
or not
whatever.
changing. Yeah. so for me, when I'm when I'm looking at progress, obviously this is where photos, come into play here. You know, measurements come into play. So let's say, we're measuring chest, or it's a female, we're measuring glutes. We do measure those things. And on top of that, it's not always just a weight thing. Like I know I have like one, Gen Pop guy, and he's very, very focused on weight. And I'm like, all I had to do is send him a photo from like 6 weeks ago to now, and he's like, oh wow, it's a big difference. And to your point, if they're just getting to the gym, they're not going to see, the typical progress of someone else. Like you said, like their weight might not be moving, it might be going up, but they're getting a little bit of muscle, they're getting leaner. So there's quite a different things you can look at there.
Yeah. And for women especially, like I think something that's important that I like to point out to women is the trend of weight. Like I like to look at women's weight trends over like month periods, because really we're having a couple weeks during the month generally where hormone profile is a little bit more calm, and we're probably going to see weight be a little lower. Then we're going to have a couple weeks where it's a little bit higher. So like
100%.
I can be like, all right, well, on the 1st of May versus like the 1st of June, we can make those comparisons, because like otherwise we're seeing a lot of this, and it's kind of discouraging. But and men, I mean, men too, to some extent, like bigger guys, especially like a bigger guy is going to fluctuate more because they have more space where like fluid and glycogen are
Mm-hmm.
coming in and out. I was talking to a girl on a consult today, and she had a smaller female client, and she's fluctuating 4 or 5 pounds in a day. For a small female, that's a lot.
Yep.
Like that probably shouldn't be happening, but for like a 200 to 250 pound guy,
Oh, normal.
is
Yeah.
pretty typical.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like it's nothing to really, worry about.
I think too many
Okay.
people just fixate on that too.
Yeah. Fluctuations for sure. I
Even
mean,
myself,
trends.
I'll fluctuate like 2-3 pounds,
Yeah.
like, and I'll
Yeah.
drop. Like I think people weigh themselves at night too, and I'm like 7 pounds heavier at night than I am in the morning. So it's like I just throw that out the window. Like I can wake up tomorrow, be 2 pounds heavier. Let's say I'm in a cut, and I'm like, whatever, it's gonna go down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Consistency, like just consistency and that's also another thing, like consistency in when you're looking at
mm-hmm.
stuff makes a difference. I mean, it seems like common sense to us, but for some people, they don't maybe have that wake up procedure. They wake up, go to the bathroom, empty, check the weight, blah, blah, blah. Like it's maybe not as common sense to everyone, so all those things matter for sure. Okay, is phosphatidylserine post cardio session a good cortisol management tool? I don't think you need, they say 140 beats per minute, so it's like a medium intensity. But I don't think you need cortisol control for a cardio session. I think that's kind of splitting hairs. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because cortisol is going to go up in response to any type of like
Physical training, like
intensive activity. So that's pretty typical. I really wouldn't like try to artificially push your cortisol down just because you're doing an activity, because you got to think too, with that response is also like your immune system responding, and all these things responding that are helping you heal from those exercise bouts, so you don't necessarily want to like push it down. The only thing I would say here is, and this isn't maybe cardio related, but like if you train at night, like sometimes I will, sometimes I will have people use something maybe that has phosphatidylserine or adaptogens or something at night to bring that excitatory response down.
They're
So
up
they can
here
sleep.
right post work. I know for me, if I train at night, I'm screwed. Like I gotta take something.
Yeah, I can't do it.
I'm just wired. I'm up here.
Yeah, cardio, like low intensity cardio, doesn't really bother me because I'm just bored and tired and I can just go to sleep after that. But if it's like an actual training session, forget about it.
Yeah, and I can be smoked and I'm still like I'm not sleeping.
It's like that tired and wired, you just lay in bed and
Exactly.
and then you're pissed off because you can't fall asleep.
No, that's a good point.
For sure. Okay. I think I got out of order a little bit here. Let me look. So we got, here's another one. Wait a minute. we got one more. This is a question about a flush protocol. When would you use it, basically? Okay. So I would say personally, flush, maybe something if I'm going to do it, maybe something I would use early on with a client that has like detox issues. We're seeing like sluggish clearance, GI, maybe some liver detox issues, things like that. They would benefit from a flush. Something to keep in mind though is that, and this was something I talked about on that last call too before we got on here, was that like her client, for example, was having like histamine response, like these inflammatory responses already. So when you do a flush or you do some kind of intensive like detox protocol, you are like opening up all of these pathways to push these toxins and things out. So if you're like already immune compromised, you got to be careful like lighting a fire in that person.
Yeah, like, you don't want that like blowback either.
Right, because then you might not have a very good experience from it.
Good point.
Cool. So that's all. That was like the 6 or so questions that I had saved. Did you have anything on your end?
I'm trying to pull up this my question box. That's what I've been trying to kind of do in the background here. I don't think I can do it on my laptop without exiting out of the live.
Because when I pull up my questions, it actually gives, that's so weird. It actually gives me my questions from my chat box. That's weird.
Oh, my chat box expired because I did it earlier in the day yesterday.
That's fine.
So I think I got to go back in like the archive, but I can't
fine.
on the.
Let me look in the chat.
Laptop. Does anyone have any questions?
There was, okay, we got the inflammation one already. There was one more. Hold on.
Colon cleanse. Is a colon cleanse ever advised while on prep? The way I look at things is if you're having digestive issues on prep, like there's another issue going on there. Now, it's kind of more normal. I don't want to say normal, but you see it more often later in the prep, but it also depends like where in the prep you're having it. Let's say you're, 14, 12 weeks out, you got to address something there that isn't the prep itself. Now, if you're 2 weeks out and your food's low, I sometimes will have people take, whether it is those magnesium citrate pills, not the actual liquid, or maybe you need to address some fiber, or even, I don't know if you ever heard of the supplement Mago 7. If I'm in a pinch, I'll add that in. It's not a habit for me, but even in my own preps, if I'm in a pinch, the last week, sometimes I'm still moving smooth. I might even add it in just to make sure, a few caps at night, like just for a little bit of insurance. But again, if you're having digestive issues early in the prep, there's probably like a stress component or even like a underlying gut component that you had prior to the prep that wasn't addressed yet.
Yes, like, so for example, I had a guy today, actually, he's in prep. I want to say we are like 12-ish weeks out, and he's having a little bit of, so he was a client that I worked through a SIBO protocol with and some other stuff prior, and he was having some things crop up, and he was in a good spot condition-wise. So this was a place where I'm like, all right, diet break, rinse off some stress. Mm-hmm. Let's calm this down, because I knew that it was just more of a stress response from him having been pushing him, right? And I knew he was kind of susceptible to those things. So like that was a good place for us to take a little bit of rest and let that digestive system calm down. Because like you said, a lot of the time what's happening is you're getting all that sympathetic drive, right? So mobility's slowing down, your stools get irregular, and then if you ignore it, obviously it's going to turn into a bigger issue.
Yeah, there's just compounding at that point.
Right. How do you typically implement a cleanup phase after a long bulk? So that's a broad question. So like go back to what we had said earlier. Why are you doing the cleanup phase? Like, are you insulin resistant? Are you just too fat? Are you have digestive issues? Like, so for me, for example, I didn't really have an excessive amount of body fat. So yeah, I'm going to lose some body fat during the cleanup phase, but that wasn't really my primary goal, right? My primary goal was to essentially drop some of that GI inflammation and get my stools normalized and blah, blah, blah. And once that was better, I'm going to be in a good spot to go ahead and, go ahead and proceed. For some people, it is simply like a body fat metric. You know what I mean? Like you just need to lose body fat to get to a point where, where you're good. So I think that there's, in order to know when you're ready to go back into a bulk, like the things I'm looking at are like, is insulin sensitivity improved? What does digestion look like? And what does body fat look like? So like, I always look at those fatty areas on people. Like, what's the area that's probably going to accumulate fat quickly once we push calories back up? Like, if it's a guy, maybe it's that low back. You know what I mean? Where a lot of guys tend to hold fat in the low back. Well, I don't want that area to just be hanging over their boxer grease in the morning when they're taking photos, because I know like we're going to be sloppy real quick.
Yep.
So like I really want to get those areas down. But I would say that if you don't have a lot of body fat to lose and you're looking for more of like a digestive and insulin sensitivity reset, you could probably go in a little more aggressive with it and be in and out and 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe 10 weeks or something like. But if you do have a substantial amount of body fat to lose, then you probably need to treat it more like a subtle deficit, like you would in a prep, more so, because we're looking at, you got to lose 20 pounds or something, 25 pounds.
Yep. Yeah, and honestly, I mean, pretty much everything you just mentioned is what I do as well. I think another aspect to it is obviously like gear too. Like, let's say you've been pushing gear and, it's about that time you need to come off. For me, I don't keep pushing food a lot of times. Like, I'm going to pull down food because in my head, I'm like, okay, we could push food. We can continue pushing food and some body fat's going to accumulate. But what I would rather do is just kind of have a cleanup phase, put them in a deficit, drop them down, get that blood glucose better, get their body fat at a better point. And then once we start pushing food again, that's when we're adding that gear back in as well. To me, it just gives me more room to work with.
Yeah. And don't worry about cosmetically, it's not always super fun because you're not that lean. So then you kind of look flatter and you're like, fuck.
That's a fat, I call it like the fat flat.
Fat flat. It's like, it is what it is. But by the end of that cleanup phase, you're like, okay, looking a little more separated, looking like something's there. And then you should ideally get at least a little bit of maybe a little rebound out of that. Yeah. It's not going to be like a post-training rebound.
I was just going to say that. And normally they'll respond better. Like, I have one guy, this guy can freaking eat, man. And for him, it's normally like a blood glucose and digestive component. We have to pull back. And we'll pull back for around, 10, 12 weeks. And then when we get to pushing again, he'll break past the barrier he was at like in 4 weeks. You know what I mean?
Right,
it's insane.
Right.
So I think they're just very, very beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, I probably was dropped about 20 pounds, but I'll put 10 back on in the first,
exactly
3 weeks, 2 weeks. From a glycogen and fluid standpoint, like, it'll come back really quick.
Yep.
So,
another question go ahead.
No, you go ahead, man.
Another question was, at what point do you stop pushing a client to get one body part in if everything else is in? For me, there's a few different aspects to this. It's, as we talked about, like the stress component, is the juice worth the squeeze at that point? But also, let's say it's legs. No, let's say it's glutes, right? Let's say it's someone who has very, very stubborn glutes and we want those striations. But getting those striated glutes is going to sacrifice their leg size to the point where they're not going to have as complete of a look. That's probably where I'm going to call it. Because again, at that point, I'm looking at the total package, not just that one body part. And then again, of course, if their stress is, pretty high and we're pushing, it might end up making them look worse. If they can handle it though, and everything's looking good, then I'm probably going to push.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think, like, what level are they competing at, and like, how do they stack up in their class? Like, if they're big, if they're already going to be a good size and we're not going to really sacrifice that component of it, I might be a little more inclined to just go ahead and dig with that person, because I'm like, all right, well, we sacrificed 2% of size, but we're going to get this benefit on the other side, which is the muscle. And for some people, that benefit's just not there, Like, sometimes for it could be men. It could also be women. Like sometimes I have women that are kind of like those tweeners in the category, and like they're kind of big for bikini or something. I'm like, oh, I'm fine with just losing a couple pounds of muscle tissue on that person because they're going to look better. You know what I mean?
100%.
In in the category. So, and of course, like we know they're going to gain it right back as soon as the show's over, anyhow.
Yep.
So, really, just depends on like what level they're competing at and like who are they competing against. And on the flip side of that too, you could also think of it the opposite way. Like sometimes people just aren't going to be big in the class no matter what you do. So like maybe just being like fucking peeled out of their mind, it is the move for that person. You know
Oh,
what I
for
mean?
sure. Like that's like their strength. So it's like
Like
you
yeah,
might as well, take it to your advantage. I think another point too that we didn't mention is I do think there are certain individuals who, genetically speaking, there's certain areas that just don't come in. You know what I mean? And I think that has to be accounted for as well. Like I know I've had one guy who, no matter how much we dug, the hamstrings just never separated how I wanted them to. And at that point, digging again was more detrimental than just having a solid physique on stage.
yeah, for sure. Agreed. So, is there a max weight over stage weight you would want a female competitor to get? Can't talk. Okay. So, I, I will say this: if they're like big enough for their category and they're not trying to gain any muscle or make any type of improvement really, then I guess you really don't need to go too far over, just enough to regain normal hormone function and metabolic function,
Mm-hmm.
like you know, physiological functions, and then that's probably sufficient. So I mean, if they might only need to go, 15, 20 pounds over, but like 15 pounds over might be plenty for that person. But for someone that's maybe trying to actually make improvements within their category and actually gain muscle, like you assume they're probably going to be heavier on stage the next time they compete. So
Mm-hmm.
like their stage weight's kind of irrelevant at that point because it's not going to be their stage weight anymore.
Yep.
So you might have to kind of throw that out the window. So like really the metrics are going to be visual more than anything. Um, but I would say there are situations, bikini maybe, right, where there are like a high level bikini competitor or something like that where they're really just not going to get any bigger and they don't need to get any bigger. Maybe you're just kind of like fine tuning their look a little bit. They probably don't need to go super far over as long as everything checks out from a health perspective. Um, but that is probably the only exception because just about every other category has room
Yep.
for improvement. Like even wellness. I mean, IFBB wellness now is freaky.
Massive.
Like
Massive.
there's just not many people in any category that couldn't afford to put muscle on their physique somewhere.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I don't know
Agreed.
that many.
Agreed. And I think another good point here as well is I think everybody responds differently at a different, body fat percentage. Like I know for me, once I get a little bit of fat on, that's really where I start growing. You know what I mean? So I think having that metric of like, oh, like you can, like I hear some people say, oh, you should only get 15 pounds above stage weight, and it's like according to what? You know what I mean? Like what are you using there? Because again, someone might grow best at that point. You know, and then on top of that, like I have one girl, she's in bikini where she has to get extremely lean to get those glutes in, and everything actually still works. Like she doesn't look too lean on stage. So 15 pounds above stage weight for her, when that's kind of irrelevant because she's still not at a point where she's at a good spot health wise. So for her, the best spot is about 25 pounds above stage weight, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have males and females. Like I have some guys that just grow better if they're a little chubby.
Yep, 100%.
I have some
As long
people
as as
that
long as
don't.
they have no issues getting down, where it's detrimental to where like you're gonna have to crush them, I think it's okay.
You know, like I'm kind of the opposite. I'm not naturally like a super lean person, but I do, my body grows best like when it's sensitive and getting those rebounds and doing stuff like that. I've been heavier and I kind of diet back down to the same point, and it doesn't really, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't really serve a purpose for me in terms of muscle growth. So for me, operating in that cycle of just cleanup phase and so on and so forth, like I grow muscle and improve my physique more that way than, but I have guys that like, they don't really have an ab left. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's how they grow.
Yep.
And
No, I agree.
it does mean that they're going to need to lose 40 pounds in prep, but that's how they grow, you know?
Yep. And at that point, it's just like you plan it out strategically. You do a longer prep, you know, as we were talking about earlier, you add in those diet breaks. Like maybe they're not going to do a 16, 20-week prep. Maybe they're going to do a 30, 32-week prep. You know, it's just person dependent what they need. And again, I think, because it was a woman who asked that question, I think as long as they're getting to a point where it's not detrimental, because there's some women who, you know, you'll see them put on 35 pounds, but it's not a good 35 pounds. And then in prep, they really struggle to get it off, and it puts them in a worse spot.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, here's an interesting one. Thoughts on weight caps for divisions like men's physique and wellness?
So I actually just talked about this with someone.
I like that question.
I think it might have been yesterday. I know for a fact, you know, some of these men's physique guys are getting pretty big. But on the other end, I know some men's physique guys who they fit men's physique, but they're just level. Like they don't have those 10 pounds to work with. You know what I mean? So I think there's pros and cons to it, you know. But again, I think it should just be more visual to me, and that's why.
Yeah.
That's why it's that point right there.
The problem with it is, and but bodybuilding has weight divisions, so does classic. But the problem with it is that in order for me or you or someone else to achieve the same look, we may weigh drastically different amounts. You know, like there's bone structure and muscle bellies and like all these things that go into it. And that's why in classic, for example, like you can have guys, like there are guys on all levels, local, national, and pro, that are sucking down tons of weight that are getting beat by guys that are under the weight cap naturally that look bigger than them. You know what I mean? Like I've competed against plenty of guys, and especially in upper weights, you know, like getting up towards like light heavies and which is where I was at last time. And I'm like, at nationals, I'm pretty sure the guy that won that looked like time and a half bigger than everyone, like didn't suck down at all from what I was told.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I'm like sucking down to make weight.
So there's a men's physique guy, and he's freaking huge, bad. And when I followed up with this guy weighs like, or he used to, I don't know his weight right now. Like, he was like a top 3 Olympian, and his weight was like 165 pounds, but he looks massive. And I was like, I don't get it. And it's funny because the guy who asked that question, Will, actually coach him, and he's a great example. Like he looks really good in men's physique, but he also looks really good in classic. But right now, he's like 15 pounds above the classic weight, to the point where if we sucked him down how we needed to, it would ruin his look. You know what I mean? Now on the pro level, he has that extra 10 pounds. We could do it, you know? So our plan here is to, you know, go pro in men's physique, and then maybe think about moving to classic, you know, as a pro. So.
Yeah. That's why classic was never, like, I like the idea of the class, but I kind of wrote that off early when it came out, because the weight caps have gone up in amateur and pro, but you know, like in order for me to make the weight cap, I would look like dog shit.
Yeah. Even like me, for example, like I'm not that big. Yeah. I'm at the weight cap. Like I was literally like 1 pound below it last year. You know what I mean? And I'm not that big, and I'm competing against guys who, like, big guys who are the same height as me, and they weigh in fully clothed. And I was like, this makes no sense. Like, damn.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. If I could weigh in like 2 weeks early, we'd be good.
Yep, exactly.
I'll rebound out of that, and I'll be competitive, but you know, that's just how it goes, you know?
Yep.
Okay. That was all the questions that I saw. Someone says, the live is like a bodybuilder's bat
Bat
signal.
signal.
Bat signal. I love that. That's funny.
Yeah, I think that's all of them. Does anyone else have any questions?
You got any? You got anyone doing? What's the next national show? We got Junior Nats.
I got 2 in Junior Nats. One of my girls, she was supposed to do Universe, but I was like, you look nasty. Let's just do it. So we decided like a week and a half ago to do it. And she's pretty nasty. And then I have one guy in men's physique doing it. And then I have a couple of people in Universe and USA as well.
Nice. Yeah, I don't have anyone at juniors. My girl that was doing juniors ends up doing Universe. I'll have 2 people there at that one. And North Americans, I always have several, it seems like.
So
okay, we got a couple more. We'll answer these last 2 and we'll call it a night on these. So someone said, what is the major difference between men's physique and classic physique? I mean, I guess other than the way that they look, not much.
It's true. Like there's a lot of guys who could do both. You know what I mean? It's just they rip off the board shorts. But for me, I think there's a very, very specific, like I coach a lot of men's physique guys. There's a very, very specific look for men's physique that they want. You know, taper, arms aren't too big, very, very nice chest, very nice back. And of course, like the staples, the abs. You know what I mean? Like those are the staples. So some guys, like myself, for example, I turned pro in men's physique and I went up to classic. Like to me, men's physique just wasn't my look. And I just switched to classic and it was a better look for me. You know what I mean? So it just depends on exactly how that taper looks for you. And whether you fit more that aesthetic or to me, or fit like the freakier look better. And that's kind of how you can go about it.
Yeah, for sure. They had, some people look great posing and they don't look great standing and relaxed in a men's physique pose. It's not relaxed, but you know what I mean? Like they just don't have the muscle bellies to to look good in those poses. They look small and flat.
Yep. Or let's say, like I know a lot of guys who like their waist looks pretty thick in men's physique, but they have a mean vacuum. And so in classic, you can't even tell. You know what I mean? It looks great. They show the legs, they create more of an X frame, and it just really works for them.
Yeah. Some people have like those like smaller, peakier muscle bellies and stuff too that look really good when you pose them, but they don't look really good. Like think of like Kai Green arm versus Phil Heath arm.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
That's a great point. Muscle bellies is a great point too, because you'll have some guys who they have, really, really good muscle bellies in men's physique, and they sit in their pose and they look phenomenal. But let's say they go to that classic physique and they just don't have that detail, in those mandatory poses, like the back double, for example, or, a side chest even. They just don't have those lines in that detail. And a lot of that times I notice it's because like people can grow, like some people can grow so fast that they just don't have that like muscle maturity yet. And those guys typically do better in men's physique.
For sure. Cool. I think we're good.
Yep.
All right, brother. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. If we missed anyone in the chat, I'm sorry. They were popping up. But I will repost and tag you, and so anyone can rewatch. And I will talk to you soon, probably.
Yep. Sounds good, man. Talk to you later.
Cool, brother.
Yep.
All right, you guys have a great night.